Caught my roommate using my toothbrush for a year. Her reaction made me move out. So I caught my roommate Megan using my toothbrush this morning, and when I confronted her about it, she laughed and said, "What's the big deal? I've been using it for like a year." I'm literally typing this from a hotel room right now because I couldn't spend another night in that apartment. I know this sounds dramatic, but you guys. Her reaction was so much worse than just the toothbrush thing. Let me back up and explain how I got into this nightmare living situation, because honestly, I should have seen the red flags from day one. I met Megan through a Craigslist ad about 18 months ago when I desperately needed a roommate after my previous one moved out with only 2 weeks' notice. I was stressed about covering the full rent on my one-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland, and Megan seemed like a godsend when she responded within hours of my posting. She was 26, I'm 28, worked as a social media coordinator for some wellness company, and claimed to be super clean and respectful. She even offered to pay the security deposit upfront and move in that same weekend. The first red flag, which I stupidly ignored, was how eager she was to move in immediately. Like, she didn't even want to meet me in person first or see the apartment. She just transferred me the money via Venmo and showed up Saturday morning with all her stuff. When I mentioned how quick everything was happening, she laughed it off and said she was spontaneous and that her previous living situation had suddenly become toxic. I figured maybe she'd had a bad breakup or roommate drama. We've all been there, right? Megan seemed normal enough for the first few weeks. She kept her stuff relatively tidy, didn't throw parties, and we even bonded over our shared love of reality TV and Thai takeout. We'd watch The Bachelor together on Monday nights and she'd make these hilarious commentary tracks that had me crying laughing. I actually thought I'd lucked out with finding a cool roommate who could become a real friend. But then the weird little things started happening. Nothing major at first, just stuff that made me go, huh, that's odd, but not enough to actually say anything about. Like I'd come home and find my favorite coffee mug in the sink when I was pretty sure I'd left it clean in the cabinet. Or I'd noticed that my shampoo seemed to be running out faster than usual, even though I hadn't been washing my hair more frequently than normal. The thing is, when you live with someone, you kind of gaslight yourself about these tiny inconsistencies. Like, maybe I did use that mug and forgot about it. Maybe I'm going through shampoo faster because it's winter and my scalp is dry. You don't want to be the psycho roommate who's keeping a detailed inventory of every personal item, you know? Then there was the food situation. I'm pretty good about labeling my stuff in the fridge and keeping my pantry items on specific shelves, but things kept disappearing. Not whole meals or anything obvious, just like, I'd buy a pack of string cheese and there'd be 3 left instead of 4. Or my almond butter would be nearly empty when I'd just opened it a few days before. When I casually mentioned that I thought someone might have eaten my yogurt, Megan would look genuinely confused and be like, "Oh, weird, maybe it fell behind something. Or maybe it expired and I threw it out by accident." Again, nothing worth starting a confrontation over, but it was starting to bug me. I began keeping my expensive snacks and specialty items in my bedroom, which felt ridiculous but solved the problem. The bathroom situation was where things got really strange, though I didn't understand the full scope of it until this morning. I started noticing that my toiletries were getting used up way faster than they should have been. My expensive face wash that usually lasted 2 months was empty in 3 weeks. My prescription acne medication that was supposed to be a 30-day supply was gone in like 18 days. My hair styling products, my body lotion, even my deodorant, everything was disappearing at warp speed. I brought it up to Megan in what I thought was a casual, non-accusatory way. I was like, "Hey, I noticed my face wash ran out super quickly. Did you maybe use some when you ran out of yours?" "Totally fine if you did. I just want to know so I can budget for replacing stuff more often." She got this weird look on her face, kind of defensive, and was like, "No, why would I use your skincare? I have my own routine." Then she quickly changed the subject to ask about my plans for the weekend. But here's the thing, Megan's bathroom shelf was always pretty sparsely populated. She had like a drugstore moisturizer, some basic shampoo, and a few makeup items, but nothing that would explain how her skin always looked so good or how her hair was always perfectly styled. I have pretty expensive taste in beauty products, probably my biggest weakness budget-wise, and I couldn't help but notice that she seemed to be getting the same results I was without any of the high-end products. Around month 6 of living together, I started doing this thing where I'd make mental notes of exactly how much was left in my bottles before I went to bed. Not because I was trying to catch her, but because I was starting to feel genuinely crazy. Like, was I somehow sleep using double the amount of face wash? Was I having memory problems? It was making me question my own sanity. And sure enough, there'd be noticeably less product in the morning. Not a huge amount, but enough that I knew I wasn't imagining it. I started keeping my most expensive items in my bedroom, which seemed to solve the immediate problem but created this weird tension where I was sneaking my own beauty products to and from the bathroom like some kind of contraband. Megan never said anything about me taking my stuff out of the bathroom, but I could tell she noticed. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments like, "Oh, fancy face wash not good enough for sharing anymore?" Or must be nice to afford the good stuff. It made me feel guilty, which in retrospect is totally insane. I was feeling bad about protecting my own belongings in my own apartment that I was paying the majority of rent for. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, even though we split utilities 50-50, I was still covering about 60% of the rent because it was originally my place and my name on the lease. The breaking point could have come a few months earlier, but I was honestly just trying to keep the peace and convince myself that I was overreacting. Then my sister Emma came to visit for a long weekend in early March. Emma's pretty observant, and doesn't really filter her thoughts, which can be annoying but is sometimes exactly what you need. She was staying on our living room couch for 3 nights, and by Sunday morning, she pulled me aside and was like, "Dude, your roommate is weird." When I asked what she meant, Emma said that Megan had been going through the bathroom cabinets while Emma was showering. Like, Emma could see her silhouette through the shower curtain just opening and closing cabinets, picking things up and examining them. Emma also mentioned that when she'd gotten up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, she saw Megan coming out of my bedroom. When Emma said, "Oh hey," Megan claimed she was just checking to see if the window was open because she thought she heard a weird noise from outside. Which made no sense because my bedroom is on the opposite side of the apartment from where Megan's room is, and why wouldn't she just text me if she was worried about security? I confronted Megan about the bedroom thing as gently as possible, and she got super defensive and started crying. She said Emma was creating drama and that she felt attacked and unwelcome in her own home. She was sobbing about how hard it was to find good housing and how she thought we were friends, and honestly, she made me feel like such an ass that I ended up apologizing to her and assuring her that Emma was probably just misunderstanding what she saw. But Emma's visit had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. I started paying closer attention to Megan's behavior, and once you start looking for weird stuff, you see it everywhere. Like how she'd always find excuses to come chat with me when I was getting ready in the bathroom. She'd lean against the doorway and ask about my day or make observations about my routine. "Oh, you use that toner before the serum? Interesting." Or "Wow, you really brush your teeth for a long time, I should probably do that too." She seemed weirdly fascinated by my morning and evening routines, always asking questions about the order I did things or what specific products I was using. I thought she was just interested in upgrading her own skincare game, so I'd explain my routine and even offer to let her try some of my products. But she'd always decline, saying her skin was too sensitive for fancy formulations. Then there was the night I got home late from a work dinner and found Megan in the bathroom with what looked like my electric toothbrush in her hand. When she saw me, she quickly put it back and said she was just admiring how clean it was and that she was thinking about upgrading from her manual toothbrush. It struck me as odd, but I was tipsy and tired, so I just said, "Oh, cool," and went to bed. Looking back now, there were so many moments where I should have, confronted her directly. But there's something about living with someone that makes you want to avoid conflict at almost any cost. You tell yourself that you're probably being paranoid, that it's not worth creating a hostile living environment over suspicions you can't prove. Plus, Megan was generally a good roommate in other ways. She was quiet, she cleaned common areas without being asked, and she never brought over sketchy guys or threw parties. Finding a replacement would be a huge hassle. So I just kept quietly protecting my stuff and trying to convince myself that I was overthinking everything. I moved more of my personal care items to my bedroom and started closing my bedroom door every time I left the apartment, which I'd never done before. I even bought a small lockbox for my most expensive skincare products, telling myself it was just for organization. The toothbrush revelation happened completely by accident this morning. I woke up around 6 a.m. feeling super nauseous, I think I might be coming down with something, and rushed to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. Megan's door was still closed and I could hear her Netflix auto-playing in there, so I assumed she was still asleep. But when I pushed open the bathroom door, there she was, standing at the sink with my electric toothbrush in her mouth, brushing away like it was the most normal thing in the world. We made eye contact in the mirror and she just kept brushing. For like 5 more seconds. Like she was trying to decide whether to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd clearly just seen. Finally, she spit out the toothpaste, rinsed the toothbrush head and calmly placed it back in the holder where I keep it. Then she turned around and smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Morning. You're up early." I was so shocked that I couldn't immediately form words. I just stood there staring at her while my brain tried to process what I'd just witnessed. Finally, I managed to say something like, "Megan. Was that? Were you just using my toothbrush? And you guys. Her response is going to live rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. She shrugged. Actually shrugged. And said, "Yeah, so? What's the big deal? I've been using it for like a year." A year. She'd been using my toothbrush for a year and saw nothing wrong with it. I think my face must have shown exactly how horrified I was, because she immediately got defensive and started talking faster. "Oh my god, don't be so dramatic. It's just a toothbrush. I always rinse it off afterward. It's not like I have any diseases or anything." Megan, I said, and I could hear my voice shaking, that's incredibly gross and violating. That's my toothbrush. I put that in my mouth every day. She rolled her eyes. You're being ridiculous. We've shared drinks before, we've eaten off the same spoon when we're trying each other's food. How is this any different? You're acting like I committed some major crime. I tried to explain that there's a huge difference between occasionally sharing food and secretly using someone's personal hygiene items for months, but she just kept talking over me, getting more agitated. You know what? I'm sick of this attitude, she said, and her tone completely changed from defensive to just plain mean. Ever since your sister visited, you've been acting like I'm some kind of criminal. Moving all your precious products to your room like I'm going to steal them, locking your door, treating me like I can't be trusted in my own home. It's not your home, I said without thinking. Your name isn't on the lease. I was living here first. And apparently my instincts about not being able to trust you were completely correct. Her face went red and she stepped closer to me, which felt intimidating since I was still in my pajamas and feeling sick. There it is. I knew you looked down on me. Miss Fancy skincare routine, Miss Expensive everything, Miss This is my apartment. You act all nice and friendly, but you think you're better than me. The conversation spiraled from there. She accused me of being controlling and materialistic and said that I was lucky she even wanted to live with someone so uptight. When I pointed out that she'd been helping herself to my stuff for months without asking, she said I was selfish for not sharing when I clearly had more than enough. But the thing that really got to me, the thing that made me realize I couldn't spend another day living with this person, was when she said, "Besides, you should be thanking me. Your toothbrush never would have been properly used if I hadn't been using it too. You barely brush for a full minute." She'd been watching me brush my teeth, timing me, critiquing my technique, while secretly using my toothbrush. I just walked away. I went to my room, grabbed my laptop and some clothes, and told her I'd be back for the rest of my stuff later. She followed me around the apartment yelling about how I was overreacting and being a drama queen and how this was going to screw up her living situation since she couldn't afford the rent on her own. Maybe you should have thought about that before you spend a year violating my personal boundaries, I told her, and slammed the door. I'm now sitting in a Holiday Inn Express at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, stress eating continental breakfast pastries, and trying to figure out how to extract myself from this lease situation with minimal financial damage. I called my mom crying, I know, I'm 28 and calling mommy, but whatever, and she immediately offered to let me stay with her and my dad while I find a new place. The thing is, I keep second-guessing myself. Like, am I being dramatic? Is sharing a toothbrush really that big of a deal? But then I think about her reaction, not just the lack of apology, but the way she turned it around on me and made herself the victim. And the fact that she'd been doing it for a year. And watching my bathroom routine. And probably using all my other stuff too. I feel so violated and stupid. How did I let this go on for so long? How many times did I put that toothbrush in my mouth after she'd used it? What else has she been doing that I don't know about? TBH, I'm also kind of freaking out about the financial aspect. Breaking the lease early is going to cost me, and I'll have to pay for movers, a new security deposit, all that stuff. But I can't live with someone who sees nothing wrong with what she did and actually seems to think I'm the problem. Am I crazy for moving out over this? Please tell me I'm not overreacting. Update, same day, evening. Holy shit, you guys. The toothbrush was just the tip of the iceberg. First of all, thank you so much for all the supportive comments. Reading them helped me realize that I'm definitely not overreacting and that Megan's behavior is way more concerning than just bad roommate etiquette. Some of you asked really good questions that got me thinking, and a few of you suggested I might want to check my bedroom more carefully for signs that she'd been going through my stuff. So I went back to the apartment this afternoon to grab more of my things, and my own toothbrush, which is now in a trash bag because of you. Megan wasn't there. She texted me some long rant about how she was staying at a friend's place until I calmed down and could have a mature conversation. Which, honestly, was perfect because it gave me a chance to really investigate without her hovering. You guys, I wish I'd taken your advice months ago about setting up a hidden camera or something, because what I found makes me think she's been treating my bedroom like her personal shopping mall. I started by just looking around to see if anything was obviously missing or out of place. My jewelry box was in a slightly different position than I remembered, turned like someone had moved it to get better access to the clasp. When I opened it, everything was there, but the compartments were subtly rearranged. I keep my earrings in a specific order, studs on the left, hoops on the right, and they were all mixed up. My dresser drawers looked normal at first glance, but when I really examined my clothes, I found a few things that made my skin crawl. There were deodorant stains on a black dress that I'd never worn. It still had the tags on it. One of my expensive bras was in the wrong drawer, and when I looked closely, the underwire was slightly bent like someone with a different cup size had forced it on. But the most disturbing thing was in my closet. I had this silk blouse that I bought for job interviews. It cost me like $200 and I've only worn it 3 times for really important meetings. It was hanging in the front of my closet instead of in the back where I always keep it, and there was makeup on the collar. Not my shade of makeup, a pinky nude lipstick that I definitely don't own. I started going through my clothes more systematically, and I found evidence that she'd been wearing my stuff regularly. Perfume smells that weren't mine, makeup stains, even what looked like food stains on a white sweater that I'd never eaten in. My favorite jeans had clearly been worn by someone with different proportions, they were stretched out in weird places. The worst part? I found a few items that I thought I'd lost, shoved in the very back of my closet behind my winter coats. A bracelet my grandmother gave me that I'd been looking for months. A vintage band t-shirt that I'd assumed got mixed up at the laundromat. They were both there, hidden like she'd borrowed them and forgotten to put them back where I'd actually noticed them. I was already feeling pretty violated, but then I decided to check my makeup and skincare products more carefully. I've been keeping most of the expensive stuff in my bedroom since I got suspicious, and I had this horrible realization that she'd probably been accessing those too. My foundation bottle felt way too light for how much should have been left. My expensive concealer was nearly empty when it should have been half full. But the thing that really confirmed it was my custom mix foundation from Sephora. I have weird undertones and had to get a specific blend made. There's no way she could have gotten the same shade anywhere else, but it was definitely being used by someone. I found my missing lip balm in the pocket of a jacket I never wear, with different teeth marks on it. Teeth marks? Different from mine. Meaning she'd been chewing on my lip balm. At this point I was feeling physically sick, but I kept looking because I needed to know the full extent of what had been happening. I checked my bathroom products that I'd moved to my bedroom, and sure enough, everything was much more depleted than it should have been. Then I found the smoking gun. Hidden under some old magazines in my desk drawer was a small notebook that doesn't belong to me. It was like a little pocket journal with a purple cover that I'd never seen before. I almost didn't open it because I thought maybe it was something she'd accidentally left behind, but curiosity got the better of me. You guys, this notebook was a log of my routine. My routine. She'd been taking notes on what time I left for work, what time I usually got home, how long I spent in the bathroom, what days I worked out, what days I washed my hair. Everything. Like a stalker journal, but for someone living in the same apartment as me. There were entries like left at 7:45, probably back by 6:30, client dinner Thursday so maybe later, and washed hair Sunday, usually waits 3 days, so safe until Wednesday, and using the vitamin C serum again, shelf life probably 6 months, she won't notice if level goes down slowly. But the entries that really freaked me out were the ones where she was clearly wearing my clothes. Wore the blue dress to Dave's party, got compliments, she hasn't worn it in months and black boots are too big but look good with my outfit, back in closet by Sunday. There were even notes about my personal life, things she'd clearly overheard from my phone conversations. References to conversations with my friends, notes about guys I was dating, even commentary about my family. Mom called crying about Dad's job again, E probably distracted and fight with Sarah about wedding planning, E in bad mood, good time to borrow stuff. The last entry was from 3 weeks ago, E suspicious about bathroom stuff, moved everything to bedroom but doesn't lock door when she's home. Easy access when she's showering or cooking. I sat on my bedroom floor reading this notebook and literally started crying. Not just because of the violation, but because I felt so stupid for not trusting my instincts. I'd been living with someone who was studying my life like a science experiment so she could steal from me more effectively. I took pictures of every page of that notebook before I packed it with my stuff. I called the cops' non-emergency line to ask about pressing charges, but they said that since there's no proof she stole anything, she always put things back, and since we're roommates with shared access to common areas, it would be really hard to prosecute. They suggested I document everything and consider a restraining order if she escalates after I move out. I also called my landlord to explain the situation and see about getting out of the lease early. I was honest about what happened, and he was actually really understanding. Apparently I'm not the first tenant he's had with a roommate situation gone wrong, and he said he'd rather work with me to find a replacement than deal with the drama of an hostile living environment. He's going to let me out of the lease without penalty as long as I help show the apartment to prospective tenants and give 30 days notice. The real kicker? While I was packing, I got a text from Megan that said I talked to my friend about our fight and she agrees you're being way too dramatic. When you're ready to apologize, I'll be willing to discuss setting up some ground rules for sharing household items more fairly. Apologize? She wants me to apologize. For catching her using my toothbrush that she'd been stealing for a year. I screenshotted that text and sent it to my mom, who replied with about 15 angry face emojis and pack faster. I'm staying with my parents for a few weeks while I apartment hunt, and honestly, I'm just grateful that I found out when I did. Reading that notebook made me realize that her behavior was escalating, and I don't want to think about where it might have gone if I'd kept ignoring the red flags. Some of you asked in the comments whether she might have been doing other stuff, like going through my mail or my laptop. I'm going to change all my passwords just in case, and I'm definitely going to be more careful about locking up my personal information in the future. Also, several people suggested she might have been taking photos of herself in my clothes or using my stuff for social media. I'm too creeped out to look through her Instagram right now, but I might ask my sister to do some investigating. Thank you again for all the validation. I needed to hear that this wasn't normal roommate behavior and that I shouldn't feel guilty for protecting my boundaries. Update, 1 week later. I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, which feels weird at 28, but honestly has been exactly what I needed this week. I've been apartment hunting and trying to process everything that happened, and there have been some developments that I wanted to share. First, the good news: I found a really cute one-bedroom place in a different neighborhood that I can actually afford on my own. It's smaller than my old apartment, but it has a dishwasher and in-unit laundry, and most importantly, no roommates ever again. I put in an application and should hear back by Friday. The weird news: Megan has been trying to contact me all week. First it was texts that alternated between angry and apologetic. When I didn't respond, she started calling and leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails. Then she somehow got my parents' landline number, which is unlisted, and has been calling there too. My mom answered one of the calls before I could stop her, and apparently Megan told her that I stole some of her belongings when I moved out and she just wants them back. When my mom asked what belongings, Megan couldn't give specifics and just kept saying she knows what she took. I didn't take anything of hers. I was super careful about that precisely because I didn't want her to have any excuse to keep contacting me. But it's clear she's trying to manipulate the situation and maybe convince my parents that I'm the crazy one. My dad, who has zero patience for drama, told her to stop calling or he'd report her for harassment. He also suggested she find some professional help for her boundary issues, which apparently made her hang up. But here's where it gets really weird. My sister Emma, who visited during the whole bathroom cabinet incident, decided to do some Instagram investigating like you guys suggested. She created a fake account and started going through Megan's photos from the past year. Emma found at least 6 photos where Megan is clearly wearing my clothes. My blue dress, my black boots, even my grandmother's bracelet. She tagged herself in different locations around the city, always during times when I was at work or out of town. The captions were stuff like feeling cute, a new favorite outfit, and treating myself. One photo that really got to me was from a party I remember her mentioning a few months ago. She's wearing my silk blouse, the expensive one, and my grandmother's bracelet, and she's posing with a group of people I don't recognize. The caption says finally feeling like myself again, red heart emoji, #new beginnings, #fresh start. Emma showed the photos to some of her friends who are into true crime podcasts, and they pointed out that this kind of behavior, the systematic boundary violation, the stalking journal, the wearing of my clothes for photos, could be signs of a deeper psychological issue. One of them said it reminded her of cases where people become obsessed with becoming someone else or taking over their life. That honestly terrified me more than the toothbrush thing. Like, was she trying to gradually become me? Was she planning to somehow take over my lease, my friend group, my whole life? The timing of her moving in so quickly, her lack of personal belongings, the way she was so interested in my routines, it all feels a lot more sinister now. I've been going back through my memories of our conversations, and I'm remembering stuff that seemed weird at the time but I brushed off. She was always asking really specific questions about my job, my friends, my family relationships. She wanted to know about my college experience, my ex-boyfriends, even my relationship with my parents. I thought she was just being friendly and trying to bond, but now I wonder if she was gathering information for some reason. There was also this thing where she'd sometimes repeat stories I'd told her, but she'd tell them like they happened to her instead of me. Like I told her about this embarrassing thing that happened to me in high school, and a few weeks later I overheard her telling the same story to someone on the phone, except in her version, it happened to her. When I asked her about it later, she seemed genuinely confused and insisted she'd been talking about her own experience. I'm trying not to go down a rabbit hole of paranoia, but I'm definitely changing all my passwords, checking my credit report, and being extra careful about my personal information going forward. I also saved all her voicemails and took screenshots of her texts in case I need them for a restraining order. The apartment hunting has been a good distraction though. Looking at places that are completely my own, where I can leave my toothbrush out without worrying about who else is using it, feels like such a relief. I never realized how much stress I was carrying from constantly being on guard in my own home. My mom keeps saying I should see this as a learning experience about trusting my instincts, and she's right. I ignored so many red flags because I didn't want to seem paranoid or create conflict. But the thing is, even if I'd been wrong about the stealing, I still had the right to feel safe and comfortable in my own apartment. I shouldn't have had to live with constant low-level anxiety about my belongings. Some of you asked about the landlord situation. He's been great about everything, actually. He said he'd had a feeling something was off when Megan applied because she was so eager to move in without seeing the place. Apparently, that's a red flag for people who are running from previous rental situations where they caused problems. He also mentioned that he's had other tenants complain about roommates who seem too interested in their personal lives or belongings, and he's thinking about adding some clause to the lease about subletting an overnight guest to protect future tenants. I should hopefully have an answer about the new apartment by tomorrow, and if it works out, I'll be moving in next weekend. My parents have been amazing about letting me stay here and helping with the logistics, and my dad even offered to be present when I go back to get the last of my stuff from the old place. Part of me is tempted to just abandon whatever I left there rather than risk another confrontation with Megan, but some of it is irreplaceable stuff like photo albums and my grandmother's jewelry, the pieces she didn't already borrow. I'll update again once I'm settled in the new place. And seriously, thank you all for the reality check about how not normal this situation was. I needed to hear that. Final update, 2 weeks later. I'm writing this from my new apartment. Got the keys yesterday and spent all day moving in with help from my parents and sister Emma. It's a cute little one-bedroom with hardwood floors and big windows, and most importantly, only my name on the lease. The final move out from the old place was an experience. My dad came with me as planned, which turned out to be absolutely necessary because Megan was there despite having told me she'd be out for the day. She was sitting on the couch when we walked in, clearly waiting for me. My dad took one look at the situation and said, "I'll help you pack, honey, let's make this quick." But Megan immediately started trying to engage. "We really need to talk about this misunderstanding," she said, completely ignoring my dad's presence. "I think there's been some miscommunication about boundaries and sharing, and I'd like to clear the air." I told her there was nothing to discuss and that I just wanted to get my remaining belongings and leave peacefully. But she kept following me around the apartment, talking about how she'd had some conversations with friends and realized that maybe she could have been more communicative about borrowing things. She never once actually apologized or acknowledged that what she did was wrong. It was all maybe I could have handled things differently, and I can see how there might have been some confusion about what was okay to share. The moment that really creeped me out was when I was packing my jewelry box and she said, "You know, that bracelet really suited me. If you ever want to get rid of it, I'd love to give it a good home." She was talking about my grandmother's bracelet. The one she'd been stealing and wearing without permission for months. My dad, who had been pretty quiet up until that point, said, "I think it's time for you to give my daughter some space to pack." His voice was very calm but had this edge to it that made it clear he wasn't making a suggestion. Megan got this pouty look on her face and said I was just trying to have a conversation. I don't know why everyone is being so hostile. As we were loading the last boxes into my dad's truck, she came outside and made one final attempt at manipulation. She started crying and said that she was really struggling financially and didn't know how she was going to afford the apartment on her own. She begged me to reconsider and said we could work out a system for sharing things that would make me more comfortable. When that didn't work, the tears stopped immediately and she said, "You're really going to screw me or like this? After I've been such a good roommate? I never had parties, I never brought guys over, I kept the place clean. And this is how you repay me?" I just said take care, Megan, and got in the truck. As we drove away, I could see her in the rearview mirror standing in the driveway with her hands on her hips, looking absolutely furious. She texted me a few more times over the next couple of days, but I've been blocking each number as she tries contacting me from different phones. The last message I saw before blocking was, "You'll regret this when you realize how hard it is to find someone as accommodating as me." Which honestly just confirmed that I made the right decision. Someone who describes secretly using my toothbrush for a year as being accommodating is not someone I want in my life. But here's some good news. My landlord texted me yesterday to say he found a replacement tenant for my old place. Apparently he was very upfront with prospective roommates about the situation, without getting into details, and he found someone who specifically wanted a short-term rental while she's going through a divorce. He said she seemed no nonsense and not interested in making friends with roommates, which sounds perfect for dealing with Megan. I'm not sure what Megan told this woman about why I moved out, but frankly, that's not my problem anymore. Setting up my new place has been incredibly therapeutic. I have a bathroom with counter space for all my products, and I can leave my toothbrush in the holder without worrying about who else is using it. I bought all new toiletries anyway, even though logically I know the old ones were probably fine. I couldn't get past the ick factor. I also invested in a really good lock for my front door and a small safe for important documents and jewelry. It might be overkill, but after living with someone who had no respect for boundaries, I want to make sure I feel completely secure in my own space. My sister Emma has continued monitoring Megan's social media. I know it's probably not healthy, but I can't help being curious. She said Megan posted a long rant on her Instagram story about toxic people who abandon you when you need them most and fake friends who turn on you over minor misunderstandings. She also posted a bunch of photos of herself in outfits I don't recognize, with captions about new beginnings and buying myself nice things. Part of me wonders if she's moved on to some other victim, but I'm trying not to think about that too much. I reported the situation to my old landlord and left detailed notes about everything I found, so hopefully he'll be more vigilant about protecting future tenants. The main thing I've learned from this whole experience is to trust my instincts, even when it feels like I'm being paranoid. All those little weird moments, the missing food, the depleted products, the strange comments, they were telling me something important. I just kept explaining them away because I didn't want to believe someone I lived with could be so boundary violating. I'm also never having a roommate again. I know it's more expensive to live alone, but my peace of mind is worth it. Coming home to an apartment where everything is exactly where I left it, where I don't have to hide my belongings or worry about someone going through my stuff, feels like such a luxury. Thanks again to everyone who commented and helped me realize that I wasn't overreacting. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to tell you that your normal meter is working correctly and that you deserve to feel safe in your own home. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go brush my teeth with my toothbrush in my bathroom, and then probably take a long bath with my expensive bath products that nobody else has been secretly using. Living alone is the best.